let me start the recorder.
Yeah. All right.
All right. So far, we done good, Eric.
Yeah, you killed it.
Hey, welcome everybody. Capt Ron here with this week's episode of Fearless Flight Live. That is your ticket to overcome your fear of flying. And you might notice we're down to half of our crew tonight. Dieter's lovely wife, Rebecca, had a birthday today, and they're out celebrating, which we would never want to interfere with. And Diane, she may or may not show up. She had a flight and some schedule changes, and so you're stuck with Eric and I, and we're glad to be here for sure. Our show is for anybody out there who's afraid to fly, or maybe somebody that's afraid to fly, or last category is you just like to keep up on a little bit of airline industry news and what's going on out there. Let me load some slides here, and we will share those.
Carrie just jumped on.
Who just jumped on?
Carrie, our potential guest, and of course our man Jim Duke. Hi, you guys.
Oh,
and
cool.
I'm Michelle and Sue.
Okay. Cool.
I'm monitoring the guests tonight. Ron's doing the talk.
Yeah, well, we got the Eric monitoring the comments there and questions. So as always, whether you're watching this live or if you're watching the replay, please feel free to put comments and remarks down there. And if it's a question, we'd love to have it, and we'll give it a whack at getting it answered for you tonight. So, okay. As always, we want to mention join our Facebook group, Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather. We are so close to breaking through to 1,000 members there. Really exciting, and I'm going to just touch on a little bit another aspect of change that we're going through here, which is exciting. And pretty soon, Eric, we might be at risk of people thinking we know what we're doing. So well, I'll try to nip that in the bud. But anyway, tonight, I want to just briefly talk a little bit about the Clear for Takeoff 201 Global Online course. We've done that over the years, and we used to do it live. And while we enjoyed the heck out of that, and what we did typically, we got together in a hotel, either in the Phoenix area, or we moved over to LA and did several of those every year before COVID. COVID came and shut us down on both of those. And then just this last September, we cranked it up again because we were going to fly. And 201 is our content. That's the meat of the course. And the 301 flight is a graduation flight that we try to put together in an area where people have identified that they could meet us at the airport and do that. And so we tried something we did the online course first, and then in October, and then again in December, we did something a little different. We actually held flights in the Phoenix area and the LA area. And then we were just kind of working the bugs out of the whole program there. And so, and then finally in March, we were able to fly not only in Phoenix on one weekend and the LA area on another weekend, but we were we made it possible that we ended up flying out of Boston, and that really set the bar on a much higher for us, such that we have changed the course. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about this. I'm going to release this to the people who are in the 201 course. So basically what you have is the 201 global online course is content, and it's open enrollment. So if you were to sign up tonight, and you could, you would be entered into the course and you would start. It's got some instructions, and it's got videos, it's got audios, it's got PDFs to read. And in addition to that, instead of having a finite start and end to the webinars, now the webinars are ongoing. So you can enter the class, leave the class. And the biggest thing is we will be flying in cities other than Boston. We'll be going back to Boston sometime. LA, we'll be going back to LA sometime. And of course, we'll keep entertaining the folks here in our Phoenix home base here, but we'll be moving out, and we're thinking of places like Chicago, Dallas, Atlanta, up the West Coast, perhaps, maybe Seattle. It's hard to say, but we have a way to gather interest in those areas. So anybody in the world can take the 201 course, and our goal is to feed you into a 301 class that we can actually take you flying. It's a huge success. You've probably seen over the last month, we've had people from those courses, from those flights that came online during the show and told you about their experiences. And I'm going to roll out this and more of the details on Thursday. We're having a virtual graduation webinar for everybody that has been enrolled up until this point. And then we'll be coming on with that we're going to call it a new launch to celebrate the transition from the finite point of entry, if you will, to the open entry. Okay. Next thing we're going to talk about tonight is what happens when horrible anticipatory anxiety kicks in. Got a little case study we're going to go through here. We're going to take a quick look at the China Eastern crash and honor Eric and my commitment to not speculating, because we still don't have much information that would show any kind of causality for it. And then, as I said, Eric's going to monitor the questions there and comments, and we'll deal with those as we go through. Anything showing up yet, Eric?
All of our peeps are here, or lots of our peeps are here, and we wish them hello. Michelle Villa, Carrie's here, who's going to Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic tomorrow. Jim Duke, Sue Hopkins, Tracy Solis, and the Susans from Boston are here. Hopkins, and I'm not going to try and pronounce her Italian last name, and Wendy are all here. And let me tell you, oh, I lost it. Just give me 2 seconds. Carrie. Hey, Carrie, I'll give you 30 seconds. You're worried about your trip tomorrow. One of the things you brought up was weather. You'll be in an airplane that is certified for long-range over-water operations. And there is some weather on the East Coast, but they will offset offshore as they're allowed to do. And the ocean, the thermal stability of the ocean will take those weather systems down a long ways, and the guys will or gals will fly out east over the water in order to avoid the weather systems, and I think it'll work out well.
What was the question, Eric?
So she was worried about the weather primarily on her trip tomorrow from Newark down to the Dominican Republic, and
okay.
Over water routing will help break up the weather and allow them to deviate offshore as needed to stay out of it.
Okay. All right. So we won't make the connection with the name. I was going to do this anonymously, but Eric called in. That's okay. And Jana is an unexpected guest because she's probably using. No, that's okay. You're okay. It's the link from, when I do it as a webinar. If you get a panelist link, then it lets you in to the inner circle. Yeah. So you're okay. We're hoping that you'll come back on Thursday. I think you already said you're going to be there because we definitely want your input there. So it's always good to have you, Jana, and hopefully you got your certificate.
I did. I'm at my daughter's today, so
all right.
Log off and I'll see you Thursday.
All right. Thanks, Jenna. Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. So this was Carrie's letter. She wrote here. It says, "Hi, Captain Ron. Hope you're doing well. Last time we spoke, I was supposed to go to Austin, Texas, I believe, and ended up canceling. And then she said she's a wonderful person, and we're going to get her on here down the road. But she was kind of cramped for time and everything because she's leaving tomorrow morning. But this was just great time. I love, as you all know, I love working with real studies and not have to make things up, because we got too many people with too many experiences out there to have to make anything up. So anyway, so she said she ended up going on a train. And it's reminiscent of our good friend Jim Morris, who ended up that was the fate's intervention and got Jim back on an airplane after he tried to take a train took Amtrak from LA to O'Hare a few weeks ago, and he and I end up flying back from O'Hare to LA together. So what the heck, Eric? We might as well promote Amtrak there, right? It's good for business.
Yeah, evidently some people are out there, and they should be sending us vouchers.
Yeah, exactly. So tomorrow, Carrie has a trip from she's leaving from Newark, and that's what Eric was talking about, going down to Punta Cana, which is in the Dominican Republic. Gee, I'll offer this, Carrie. If for some reason you can't make it, Eric and I would be glad to take your place. That's the kind of sacrifice we're willing to make for our peeps out there. So anyway, it's there yet. She's leaving tomorrow morning out of Eric, and the weather looks horrible. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but we're going to do more of our typical thing. There's just a little graphic there of where she's headed tomorrow. I think it's about 3.5 hours, something like that down there.
That makes sense.
Yeah, winds out of the west typically, and I don't know if you had a chance. Is the weather along the route there, Eric, or did you have a chance to see where it's from?
I didn't pull it. I was just replying to her, but it's mostly inland, approaching the East Coast and sliding up the East Coast. So I think it's going to be in good shape, offsetting over the ocean, which is thermally stable, and can work for you in that way rather than.
Yeah. And Carrie, if you got any information and you want to contribute there, we'd be happy to. I'm thinking like probably the biggest concern was just like when we flew from Boston to BWI back in the early part or middle of March. It was the weather that moved into the area, not so much the weather en route tomorrow. So, and then there's just a little bit of a close up where she's headed down there in the Dominican Republic. I get nothing but just gee whizzes and wows and stuff for people who've gone to the Dominican Republic. I guess it's just gorgeous down there. I've never been there. And you said you had a couple of trips, but they turned them into training and you didn't get to fly.
The company bought them for training. The only thing better than going was being paid not to go.
Yeah, exactly.
If Eric gets us a voucher, we'll go.
Yeah. So we'll do a little bit of just coaching here on what goes on when people have, as she identified, anticipatory anxiety. And man, I've done so many coaching calls here in the last month. I don't think I've ever had that many. I love them. But I definitely see, how big anticipatory anxiety it is. And for those of you who may not have followed us all that much, anticipatory anxiety, the way I describe that, it's fear of your fear, and there have been shows when we talked about the difference between situational anxiety and anticipatory anxiety. And the difference would be situational is what is it really like to be in the situation. For example, tomorrow morning, sitting on the ground or being in the airplane when it's taken off and there's weather out there. What people find out, and this is why, if they can stick with it and stay on the airplane, this is why it passes so quickly, because the situational anxiety never measures up to the anticipatory anxiety. So the stories and the triggers and the stories that come out of those triggers that you make up in your mind that scare the bejesus out of you before you ever get in the situation, whether it's turbulence, whether it's weather, whether it's flying over water, no matter what it is, it's way worse than what it is in reality. And I'm sure Eric can validate this. That's why we see people just frantic a lot, even after taking the 201 course, getting to the airport, and you see them on the airplane, and it's like different people. And we make a big deal out of catching people sleeping, which usually happens. If it didn't happen on the first leg, it happens on the second leg. And people are just, it's hard for anybody to believe us that that's what really happens. But but we've got some pictures that, and we will blackmail you if we could get away with it. So anyway, but back to the anxiety. So the triggers happen, whether in this case, weather is the most obvious one. And what are the stories that tells us? Well, we don't know without talking to the person exactly, but these are some of the typical stories. If it's rain, you imagine, you don't have a context for flying, which is another big problem out there. So when you imagine rain, it might be being in a downpour when you couldn't see out your front windshield, and you think that we have those same problems. And I don't know about you, Eric, but I remember the first time that I had a lot of rain, and I was just totally amazed. By the time you get, certainly by 100 knots, 100 miles an hour, ain't no rain that sticks to that windshield for the most part, is there?
No, and you can actually, oddly enough, usually see pretty clearly through it, especially if it's driving rain. It's kind of like having a diving mask in a swimming pool. You can see through it pretty well.
And we used to have something called windshield repellent. We used to actually spray some stuff that would make the water less likely to stick or adhere to the window. And and we don't do that anymore. And although I've never seen a definitive reason for that, I'm guessing that the benefit was far outweighed by the cost of maintaining all that stuff. Don't you think?
What I'd heard was, remember the canisters were on the circuit breaker panels behind us, the rain repellent. Right. And the couple times I ever fired it, it was amazing. I mean, you wouldn't even need to turn on the windshield wipers. It was stunning clarity. Yeah. But what the feds determined was they were looking at those canisters, which were not new and not regularly inspected. And apparently the stuff was highly toxic, and they were far more worried about the rain repellent leaking into the pilot compartment than they were about the use of it. So they just, with the upgraded wiper systems and stuff, they said, no, you guys can't have that up there in the pilot compartment anymore. You don't need it. So it's out. And that's what I heard was why rain repellent ended.
Yeah. And so again, back to the stories with weather being the trigger, they're many and varied, but basically they center around visibility. How can you see? And the reason we can see is the main one is that we have instrumentation. We don't need to see out the window. We need to see just long enough to get off the runway, or if we're landing in any kind of precipitation, we need to be able to see as the airplane's is decelerating and stopping on the runway. But even that is less of a factor now because of the automated landing systems that we have. So getting off the ground is the only thing that we don't do on autopilot, right? 1,200 feet basically. So we've got to actually work for our paycheck for the first 45 seconds, maybe 30 to 45 seconds. And once we get on that, we flip on the autopilot, and then we sit there like you're sitting there with a remote control in your living room, controlling your TV from afar. And so the things that you might imagine, and that's probably the only thing that you can do if you've never been up in the front during a takeoff or during flying through inclement weather. The only thing is you imagine what it's like in a car or just being on the ground when you've got wind and rain and thunderstorms and things like that, and it just isn't a factor. We have limits. We have some crosswind limits. If the wind is blowing so hard we don't move, if there's a thunderstorm in between us and our initial route of flight, and while we're at low altitude, they will stop the departures or in the landings at an airport if that's a factor. But other than that, we're an all weather type operation, and it is amazing. I don't know about you, Eric, but it was impressive to fly some really, really cool equipment and to watch how it worked, and of course, I think, you like me, we love doing it. That's when we get to do our skills and all that. And even as much experience as I've had, it happens so rarely that we get to either take off or land in really, really low visibility. It's just amazing. But that's why we have to practice in the sim all the time. So the triggers activate your amygdala and your fight or flight system, which is the way it's supposed to work. And then you're supposed to have the ability to use the higher level of your thinking to talk yourself out of that so that you can regain control of your attention. And the problem with people who are afraid to fly is they can't do that. The problem is their attention gets hijacked. And so the difference between Eric and I sitting there next to one of you who might be afraid to fly is what the quality and the content of our thinking is. Basically, yours is just centered around what if, I don't like this sucks. And you can't quit thinking about what you're thinking about. Whereas we're sitting there, I famously say, I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat the next time I get an opportunity there. And so the solution, there are some short-term solutions. They center around taking a deep breath, because when you do that, when you inhale, you actually activate your sympathetic nervous system, which is the part that gets you up and makes you a little bit more anxious. It gets you ready to engage a threat. But the best part is when you exhale, you engage your parasympathetic nervous system. So the inhale is like the accelerator in a car, and the exhale is like the brake on a car. And so when you do that, you are literally calming yourself down. I'm reading a new book here where they're talking about the effect on HRV, heart rate variability, which is a much more meaningful measure of heart rate than just the average heart rate or heartbeat per minute that we normally use. And what they're saying is there's research to show that a resonant frequency for most of us is just 6 breaths per minute. So that would be a 10-second combination to inhale and to exhale. And I'll be talking more about that in the future. But for right now, particularly Carrie, if you can imagine just focusing on your watch when you start to get anxious, or before that, to prepare yourself, take a 4-second inhale and a 6-second exhale. And that actually causes a resonation with the anxiety producing parts of your brain. So short-term breathing through a straw, writing, you've heard me talk about writing with your non-preferred hand, trying to get some of those crazy thoughts out of your brain and down on paper, and then try to reframe that. Yes, I feel anxious, but I've been here before. Yes, I've been anxious and worried, but it ends. It doesn't last the whole flight. So those are some things that you can do. And in the long term, take a course. Join us in the 201 class if you haven't. One of the benefits of the 201 class is you don't just enter it, and when you're done, you're done. We're having a 60-day access to the course, because we want to encourage people to not just go through the material once, but to stay engaged. And we will be adding material constantly until either I die, Eric dies, or we don't have anybody that's putting new information in there. So it's constantly being upgraded. We're adding new things that we learned all along there. So anybody got any questions out there, Eric, that you can?
I hate to say it, we're so captivating, even more so than we thought. Our people are spitting out favorite train ride schedules and length of times from memory, like us spitting out limitations. So it looks like about half of them are guilty of it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, and again, fear flying is all about your attention. It's what happens when your attention won't pay attention to you, and it gets hijacked by your amygdala, and it's it. So we want to take just a little bit of an update here, because I have had, even though it's way, way, way far away, and it's in circumstances that I would say 99% of our audience will never be exposed to. We want to talk a little bit about what we know on the China Eastern Airlines crash. And we're going to talk about what we know. Eric and I have committed to each other that we are not going to speculate, because it does no good. And you just pick up any newspaper article and you're going to see some expert quoted as what might have happened. And we could do that as well. We could talk about what might have happened. And we've engaged in that a little bit. We certainly have opinions about this, but the only way to really manage the dialogue around this is to wait to see what happened. So these are just some facts that I got from an article. Eric can join me on this. They made no Mayday. And so what does that mean typically, Eric, when they don't do that?
In my mind, which is speculative.
Well, first of all, what is a Mayday?
So if we have an emergency that we need assistance with, and we would issue a Mayday call to air traffic control, and they would A, know we're in trouble, B, get experts or company experts or whoever on the line, and C, clear all the airspace around us and ask us where we want to go and what we want to do, and make us the number one priority to get there, and do whatever they could to help us get to wherever we have decided to deviate to.
Yeah. And the fact that they didn't make a Mayday means typically,
in my mind, they're so busy dealing with the situation, because you fly first, then you navigate, then you communicate. And in my mind, they're so busy with the flying part, they just don't have time.
okay. And yeah, they just didn't have and they had no warning perhaps of what was going on. So you helped me with this. 29,000. They were 29,000 feet, 100, so cruising at flight level 290, and we know from the altitude reporting, I believe, from the air traffic control station, not from the flight data recorder yet, but they descended about 20,000, little over 20,000 feet in less than a minute, which is that's an impressive rate, right?
Yeah, it is. 4 miles in less than a minute.
Yeah. So that would have been that, and as long as the airplane was in one piece as it was coming down, which people have verified that there were a few observers that actually saw the impact, I believe, or at least saw the airplane before that. That doesn't mean there were parts coming down. That means that it was all intact at that point, and at least prior to the impact. And they descended down there till just slightly above the ground, and then they climbed a little bit, and then they made a final plunge, which impacted the ground. They crashed nearly vertical, which is significant. And again, despite that, you're going to see articles and accounts that you read about this, that the airplane plummeted, and that implies, them being out of control. And I'm here to tell you that that's not the type of controlled descent that we would typically make, but you can bet that somebody was trying to fly the airplane, and since it stayed intact. And the last thing I put in there, I'm not a sadist. I just put that in there just to show you the literary license that some people make note of. And they made a point, you would expect an airplane that crashed at a high velocity, and the worst kind of impact that your mind could make up would be, directly into the ground. There's not going to be much left that's going to be intact there. And this is why people get anxious in general, because everybody has a vision of crashing as being a crash like this. The reality is this just doesn't happen. 20 years, right, Eric? 20 years since we had the last fatal accident in the domestic U.S. there. And this airplane, I read some numbers about the Boeing 737-800, not to be confused with the Maxes, but the 800, like the previous versions of the Boeing 737, hugely reliable. I think there's over 4,000 of them flying over the past 20 years. And even on that airplane, there's never been anything like this in recent memory. So if there's something mechanical, I saw that China Eastern Airlines grounded all of their Boeing fleet, even the non-800s. But I guess this borders on speculation, but nobody else in the world who's flying those has done so. So I'm guessing that was more of a thing that they might have done, at least some element of public relations to show that they were taken the problem serious or anything like that.
Sure,
But-
and they can do that out of an abundance of caution.
Yeah.
And because of COVID still being very hot over there, they can do that because they still have so much of the fleet on the ground that's not really gonna that's really not gonna hurt their operation. They have a ton of Airbus models parked, 320s, 330s, some 350s and Boeing triples, because they just aren't flying a lot. So they can do that even though it's an awful lot of airplanes without hurting their operation. The amount of operating that they're doing right now.
Yeah.
That's a great slide, Ron. Tell them what that is.
Well, you tell them.
Okay. Well, the articles and the research people and everything say we're looking for the black boxes. We're looking for the black box. We're looking for the black boxes. Well, that's one of them. And you'll notice they're red if you're not colorblind, which makes them a lot easier to find than if they were black. But that's a flight data recorder that was in the tail of the airplane. And considering the speed they hit the ground, it looks pretty good. And they now have both the cockpit voice recorder and that flight data recorder in the possession of the investigators. And the U.S. NTSB is helping them. The Chinese had them over, didn't quarantine them, took them right to the crash site. And so they're getting help from the U.S. NTSB. And when they can extract data from these, they should have some initial information soon. By soon, I mean even a couple weeks, a month, some bits and pieces.
And to me, it's worthy of note that, we've had people since the war in the Ukraine has started, people questioning, well, how does that affect the intercontinental cooperation when it comes to aviation stuff? And I think, it's fair to say that China is probably more in alignment with Russia than they are with the rest of the world. And just to show you, when it comes to accident investigation and aviation safety, countries are willing to put down the fences and invite that. And we, of course, we have some of the most leading techniques and capabilities and experience in accident investigation in the world. And so that's why the NTSB was called into action there. So anyway, we can count on us. We'll continue to report that. If I had a flight on a 737-800, I would not alter my plans. I'd keep on trucking. So we'll just kind of wind this up with just a review of what we call our fearless flight method. And that is, no matter who you are or what you're bothered by, it's always best to educate yourself. Part of that is to educate yourself regarding psychology, the psychology of fear of flying, how the mind works, how your survival instinct can hijack your mind and cause you discomfort when it doesn't have the full information. And in education about how airplanes fly, many people say, I'm not worried about the airplane crash and all that. I'm just worried about, whether I'll be able to manage my own anxiety and all that. Yeah, that may be true. But when you think about it, why are you getting anxious if you weren't worried that ultimately you're going to be trapped in the airplane if something goes wrong? So education is a key. And if you're lucky like I am, you got a curiosity bug, and it makes it a lot easier. But the people who are curious, not only in aviation, but in their own psychology and stuff like that, and persistent, are the ones that whip this in the bud. And that's the basis for a big part of our Clifford Takeoff 201 course. The next thing, and this is something we do for people or help people do for themselves, and that is get them on the airplane fastest. And that is learn to disrupt and distract your thinking so that when your attention gets hijacked, which it will, you cannot keep or prevent your attention from getting hijacked. Just think of if somebody were to come up behind you and make a loud noise in your ear. We have a natural fear of loud noises. You would immediately be startled. And in that moment, your attention would be hijacked away from whatever it was you were thinking about it. So the key is to learn how to disrupt that thinking pattern once it happens, or distract your thinking away from that and give you some relief, because then you can connect that moment to another moment and you can find some peace and tranquility on the airplane. And the last thing turns out to be the biggest, and this is why the 301 class is so successful, is when you do things with a group and when you talk to other people, who are either, maybe they're just in the same place you are. It's validating to because we all tend to think that there's something wrong with us when we have problems like anxiety disorders and whatnot. And it helps to talk to others who can reaffirm that, no, you're not the only one out there. And in particular, when we have people on here that have overcome it or are moving through it, it's nice to hear some positive remarks and to build some hope that you can overcome that as well. So I'd like to thank you for being with us tonight. Any last questions or comments, Eric?
No, our peeps are paying attention, but talking amongst themselves. I just wanted to tell Carrie, have a great trip. It's going to be fine. Make sure you take plenty of sunblock, and absolutely, positively do not get sunburned on the first day or the second day or the third day. Don't do it at all, and especially don't do it early. That's all I got.
All right, that's probably the best information we have for this evening. So thanks again, everybody, for watching us, hanging in there, and I think we deserve some kind of a medal here for pulling this off, Eric. So we'll have to celebrate privately.
We'll celebrate privately, and next week, you guys, you can put commentary up to Dieter and say Ron and Eric's mouths were moving the whole time, but nobody heard anything.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right. So we'll see you back here next week, everybody. Fearless Flight Live. Captain Ron and Capt Murig signing off, and hope you have a great week and happy landings. All right. Bye-bye.